Word. All right. Well, welcome everybody. We
Hello.
just missed the recording button. That's okay. Paul Tokgozoglu.
Dude, you're so close. It's Tokgozoglu.
Tokgozoglu.
It's okay. I've heard some terrible butcherings of it over the years. The worst was Tokgozoglu. One time we got a letter delivered to the Tokgozoglis when I was a kid, and it was just a misspelling of sorts. But I was like, man, this is not the fucking name for real.
It sounds so Japanese, man.
That's what I get, but it's not. It's Turkish, and yeah, my dad's side of the family is from Turkey, so that's where the name comes from. But it's crazy because people hear that name and they think that they're going to meet some sort of a Japanese figure or something, and then it's me, and I'm a normal white person who grew up in Maryland. So it's a weird ass name for sure.
I like it. If it suits you well.
Thank you.
Does.
I try. I try to be deserving of such a weird ass name.
Bro, you've had me on your podcast. We've talked many times over Zoom, over the phone, over really long distance communicative systems.
Yep.
It's very nice to meet you in person.
You too, man.
Always. We've had very good discussions. Our podcasts with each other are some of my favorites.
Thank you.
And you've been doing it for a long time. Thank you, man. You've been doing it for a very long time. And your experience and your expertise shows in how well you orchestrate the questions and how well you listen and stay in tune with everything. And I know you do a lot of episodes over Zoom or some kind of audio video device of that nature. And if I figure out a way to keep very good quality, I will do the exact same. So thank you for being here in person. I've been waiting for this moment for a very long time. And a part of me feels bad that I won't do it online. But to have you here is an absolute blessing, bro.
Dude, to be honest with you, man, I'm leaning more towards doing shit your direction. I like doing things in person more these days. I got kind of sick of doing online business stuff, to be honest with you. I realized I had kind of an epiphany this year, and I realized that I've wanted to be an entrepreneur for some time. And then when the digital business thing, online business thing kind of started moving forward and going ahead, I kind of assumed, because I was in Germany at the time, so really a digital online business was really my only sort of option to actually do. And I was kind of like, man, that's what I'm going to do. So that's kind of what I've been doing the last couple of years of my entrepreneurial journey is online business, which started off with podcasting, which started off with the Jiu-Jitsu podcast like 2 or 3 years ago, and then grew into Beyond Homo Sapien, which is the show that you've been on. But regardless, what I'm trying to say is I realized this year that I don't want to have an online business necessarily. I want to have a business, like an in-person business. You know what I mean? That I like doing things in person this year is what I found. Like I like the podcasting, but really I was just doing that because I was lonely. I was just going through a divorce at the time last year, like when we first connected, and I was doing so many online interviews with people, but it was really just because I was really lonely, honestly.
Dang,
so
bro.
It was like one of those things where I realized that this year, and I realized like, man, I don't think I want to have an online business. I like in-person stuff. I'm a very extroverted person, so, and I've started to do that more this year with Phoenix event, with the event business we're starting out in the Ozarks, me and some friends, and that's going really well. So I like doing that. I want to move more towards what you're doing here with the in-person shit. And
it's very different.
Yeah, it's way better. I found online stuff is cool. Like you get to impact more people.
Yeah, 100%. And I feel it's so weird because I know a lot of people that it's just very hard to travel to, that I feel like we're missing out on really good discussion because I just won't do it. So it's like, okay, maybe that'll happen when it should. There's that interesting dynamic there, but there's such a different level of depth that occurs when you are in person with people.
And it's more fun.
It's pretty fun, man.
It's way more fun. And I think that there's a different energy. And overall, the thing that really cemented it for me was I realized that I don't like listening to online interviews for some reason, like for the most part. Like, for instance, we were just talking before the show, but Edward Snowden went on Joe Rogan's podcast. Stuff like that. I'm like, fuck yeah, I'm tuning in because that's, a different level. You know what I mean? Like, that's a different story sort of interview. You know what I mean? But with just random people, not that you and I are random people, but we're still up and comings. You know what I mean? I was always like, man, I'm never watching random up and coming entrepreneurial folks talk on Zoom with each other. You know what I mean? Like,
I do know what you mean.
I watch them in person. If someone has produced a really high quality video and it looks like a very real conversation, like what you do, now I'm interested. But I'm just not gonna watch some fucking dude on Facebook who's interviewing someone on Zoom. And that's what I was doing, though. That's what I'm saying. That's why I'm talking
so
like this.
Interesting.
And I had this epiphany. I was like, man, why am I creating content that I wouldn't watch? You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I thought the information was good, but I was like, man, in my day-to-day life, I don't watch shit that looks like this. Why am I making a podcast that looks like this? So that's why this year I've slowed down and I've tried to do more like this, more in-person shit for sure, and more high-quality stuff. So I think that's a higher, I don't know, it's different schools of thought in the marketing world.
You scoot closer to the mic.
Yeah, if that makes sense. Different, like,
I'll move it to you, yeah.
Different, like, yeah, you get what I'm saying. Different schools of thought in the online business world or marketing world or whatever you about should you do less stuff that's more high quality or more stuff that's lower quality? And it's always a debate. But I found for me, I think I want to make something in the middle, you know, something that's high quality but a little less frequent, but not so edited. I don't know. I'm rambling. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. What's for sure isn't I understand, not that you're rambling.
Oh, it's okay. I'm a chronic rambler.
What is your... It's such a hard question, especially for people like you and I.
Yeah.
I think this is hard for martial artists because we're so present, or we have to be present in order to be like actually like survive and not get our bones broken and such. What do you feel like the bigger picture is for you? Like, what are you kind of trying to build or move towards? What's that feeling? It doesn't have to be a detailed description, but what's that feeling that you want to provide or build?
I think that people are really hungry for real community. That's what we found out in the Ozarks, is people are trying to have more communal living situations, not exactly like communes or anything like that, but intentional communities, which is, from what I understand, a little bit more geared around the idea of like work to live at places relationships, but always very direct, I've found, and never centered around any sort of a spiritual concept. I feel like that's what differentiates a lot of these different communities, is some are just a very strictly a working relationship, and others are more of a spiritual community with some sort of a leader figure, perhaps. So I don't want to do that kind of stuff, but I'm very interested in the intentional communities and doing more tiny homes, doing stuff like that. Like, that's something that I'm going to get involved with here pretty soon with a friend of mine, that we're getting ready to launch some sort of projects, but in the tiny home market, to sell different tiny home kits and stuff like that. You know, like, there's different things you can do for just like $10,000. You can sell a little tiny home kit to people, and then they can set it up themselves, almost like a really high quality IKEA sort of thing. And then you can set that up on some sort of a farmland or something like that. Or you could even put it on a trailer and you could travel around the country. So this is the sort of stuff that I want to do for my own lifestyle. So that's also a service or a product that I want to then sell to the world.
Damn.
Stuff like that. Because there's so much land. And that's a source of income for a lot of these landowners out in like rural Missouri, which is fucking beautiful if you've never been there. Or here in Idaho, it's gorgeous, right? Like, everywhere you look, you're like, holy shit, there's nothing here, but it's amazing. And someone owns that land.
Yeah.
Someone owns all that land. And then there's a huge homelessness problem and poverty problem and cost of living problem all over the fucking country. And there's also people who are hungering to get back to nature and get back to a more primal lifestyle and a more holistic lifestyle. And a lot of these people are not trying to do the 9-to-5 lifestyle. And there's a lot of farmers in this country who have a shit ton of land in beautiful parts of the world and no way to monetize it necessarily. So what we want to do is sell fucking tiny house kits. And then I can go to those people and I can say, hey, farmer, you can clear out an acre of your land. Here's our kit that helps you do that. Here's fucking whatever, a service we recommend that can help you do that. And then we can help them clear out their land. And then you could put a tiny house on it and you can rent it out for $200 a month. Dude. Something like that. So for people who have 300 acres of land out in Montana and it's beautiful, they can set up a tiny house community or something like that. And then they can start renting it all out to people who need cheap living, who are also trying to get to a more like holistic lifestyle. So that's what I want to do. Stuff like that. Because that's what people really need. People like are really hungering for these like real solutions to the real issues in our country.
It's really cool to hear that you want to provide people with what you feel like is meaningful for you. And I think that's one of the most important steps in moving anything further along is, do I use this?
Yeah, for sure.
Do I want to watch this quality? Do I want to be more of a minimalistic kind of person with good quality?
Yeah, and what problems am I facing right now?
Totally.
Cost of living.
You live where? Right
Missouri.
now? Missouri?
Yeah. It's not expensive in Missouri, but what I guess I'm referring to is more just paying for my lifestyle, which is more than Missouri, because I like to travel around and do shit. But you know what I mean? That's what people care about. People don't want money. They want to pay for their ideal lifestyle. You know what I mean? Ideally.
Dang. Interesting.
For some people, that's $500 a month in South America. You know what I mean? Because they live like a king for $500 on some, plantation they found down in, a paradise in Mexico or something. You know what I mean? Like there's all these little spots of heaven popping up all over the world because the world's becoming more global and there's beautiful, wonderful people everywhere. So people are trying to live in all those places. I'm trying to live in all those places. So people aren't looking to have tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Usually you ask Americans these days, why do you need so much money? And they're like, well, I've got a lot of debt. I've got a lot of medical bills or this, that, the other thing. I've got to pay for gas, this, that, all this shit. And you're like, okay, if you could go out into nature and live your ideal lifestyle more like for $1,000 a month or $2,000 instead of $8,000 a month, everyone's going to be like, fuck yeah, I'll happily make, a quarter of what I'm making now living a much better lifestyle. You know what I mean? That's where our civilization is heading, I think. I think that we're tired of these fucking governments taking their time to make our lives better. So we're going to start taking initiative. And also the world doesn't make sense the way we structured it anymore because the world is so global. These governments don't make sense, So that's what I'm trying to help people create, is these different solutions to do that. Because that's what I want to do. So like you said, yeah, I'm my perfect ideal client, my perfect ideal customer. So I just can help make the things that I'm interested in. So that's kind of what I want to do going forward. But also podcasting and writing too, for sure.
It's pretty cool to think of yourself as your ideal client.
That's what Tim Ferriss teaches in the 4-hour work week. He talks about like, think about yourself as who you're designing your product for, or think about like yourself from the past. That's the best way to design your products and do your shit. Make your podcast.
That registers very deeply through my body right now. That resonates very well.
Yeah, man, it's powerful because you're essentially always just designing products or stuff, or this podcast, for instance, for like a version of you that exists in the past that we're trying to help right now.
Oh, you're so on point,
right?
Man.
So you can also, conversely, if you're designing products or services or podcasts or books for today, you can then say, okay, what am I thinking about and talking about today? What are we always talking about? And then you're like, okay, maybe that's what I can write my next blog post on. And then suddenly that blog post takes off because people like it. And then you're like, okay, I'll write a book on that. But it was all based off of what you are interested in and talking about with your friends all the fucking time.
How do you help people kind of hone in on those different topics in a sense, or examples? Because so you help a lot of people. You've been doing this for a long time. How do you help somebody transition from what they have to be doing, what they need to be doing, to what they actually want to be doing?
Well, I think that I cannot help them at all. They have to help them. I can just help themselves express that voice more, and I can make them stronger and become a better, healthier person. You know what I mean? Like to give them all the tools that they need. But I think they have to answer that question for themselves. Anytime that if I tried to answer that for them, I would be doing them a disservice.
Totally.
But usually if you ask anyone, if you ask any fucking person, most days, if you have like a very genuine conversation and you genuinely ask them like, what do you feel like working on in life? Most people have an answer. There's very rarely that you encounter someone who's like, a middle-aged person or someone our age who just has like never dreamed of anything. Just about every human is like, I used to want to write books, or I used to want to be an actor or something. Like, you know what I mean? So like, all you really have to do is figure out what was that thing for them, and then just figure out why are they not doing that thing anymore? Whatever it is, what did they stop? And then how can they get back into it? And then how can they keep going? And then how can they make more money with it, or do this, that, or maybe you point out things that they can't see or stuff like that. But I don't know, man. I'm trying to get away from like life coaching shit. I used to do some of that and it was all right, but like, I don't know. I feel like it's almost an oxymoron sometimes.
I totally feel you there.
It's better to teach people jujitsu and kettlebell swings, and then they're their own life coach, because you just had a really wonderful, tough experience helping them become stronger.
It's very wise to perceive, I don't even know if it's coaching or teaching that way, but this is where I think we really resonate with Bruce Lee. Because, the man. Because he aimed to provide people with an environment to teach themselves.
For sure.
He knew that we don't teach each other stuff. We provide each other with information that therefore registers in our system and into our body, into our deep subconscious mind, and it filters itself. And we can either be mindful of the recognitions, or we can let it go in one ear and out the other. And how mindful are we within the process of transferring information and data with people, through our own being? What environments create certain pieces of data inside of us? Relationships, discussions, the people around you, bro, the fucking environments that we walk into. Are you getting completely different data when you're down at the nightclub than when you're at jujitsu practice?
Oh, for sure.
Right?
1,000%, because it's all just different areas of consciousness. Because all of this is consciousness vibrating, I believe. Like, I think that's what quantum physics is starting to find, is that all of the base formula, the base thing of reality, if we distill everything down to its base formula, or base thing, for lack of a better term, is some sort of a wavelength. That seems to be what quantum physics has deduced, although most people have, the whole point of quantum physics really is that they're still ongoing. So there is no consensus, but it seems to be some sort of a wavelength, is like that base particle. And that's what Hindus have been saying for thousands of years, that all of this is just consciousness vibrating, and that Shiva is constantly chanting Om at all times somewhere out in the cosmos, and that wavelength of Om, which is I think like 136.1 hertz or something like that, I forget off the top of my head, is what generates the universe into existence. They've been saying that for 5,000 years. And now finally in 2018 or whatever, quantum physics is like, we figured it out. It's consciousness vibrating. And so I'm sure the Hindus are like, man, these fuckers, you know what I mean? They haven't been listening. But so I hear about that, and then you start to learn more about the different occult and metaphysical, well, not metaphysical, but esoteric traditions about the world. And you learn that that's also what they've been saying for thousands and thousands of years, that we live in a mental universe, that this is a mental creation somehow, almost like we live in the dream of some god or something like that. But you and I are mind, that this is a mental creation of this universe. And so then to go to your point of what you were talking about is then you say, okay, literally, if this is all mind, what about this jaguar behind us? You know what I mean? Like, what does that represent? You know, so on and so forth. And I have it here on my sweatshirt as well, the jaguar. I walked in here wearing it and I was like, man, there is a jaguar on my sweatshirt that looks a hell of a lot like the jaguar behind Zaren's thing. So then to go back to what Bruce Lee was saying, if this really is a mental universe and all these spaces that we've created really are, you know, mental constructs, then I guess I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. But these are ways where I can know for sure, where it's like, okay, because it's all mental is what I'm saying. And that's what people, I think, fail to ask when they talk about consciousness or spirituality or whatever, is that these are not supposed to be metaphysical, ethereal concepts, but very practical ones where you look down at your shirt and you say, oh, wow, same Jaguar. Guess I'm where I'm supposed to be. Let's proceed. But it's a very practical thing that I can then count on because it happens to me all the time. So, and the more that you go down that path, the more that you learn.
You're more receptive to it.
But the reason I bring that up is because of your point about the different, creating spaces is kind of what I was hearing you say, like creating different places for growth.
And being aware of what places inhibit growth, what places expand growth. And it's funny, I've been thinking a lot about potential and expansion, where potential actually goes in all directions. It goes into the positive, it goes into the negative. We have potential every single direction that we can imagine or fathom. Our approach determines what direction of potential we actually head in. So potential isn't just this positive thing. It's literally a notion. It's conceptual. How do we behave in the present moment? How does our approach, how do our resources, our intentions, our environments build the pattern of potential we move towards? This is where community, like you were saying, can be very important because it helps bring the potential of like more and more components into hopefully a more positive direction. Or even positive is weird to say there, maybe just a more beneficial direction because what's positive, what's negative, that seems to be pretty subjective. But beneficial seems to hold the presence of wisdom and lessons and learning and growth and trial and error, and that how the yin and yang of something maneuvering itself is all beneficial.
For sure. What do you feel like is the difference between those two, between something that is for your growth and not? Like what is, when are you growing versus wasting time?
I think we're always growing.
I think so too. Like, but I don't know. Sometimes it's almost like you're not an active student. Sometimes you're the guy up front in class taking notes, paying attention and acing the test every single time. And sometimes you're the guy in the back of the class who's like just on his fucking cell phone. And you know what I mean?
Yeah, this is a really good question.
Yeah.
And topic because I genuinely believe each component of what we experience builds perspective. And that perspective may be the most important thing that we can obtain. Perspective on when we are or not on. Perspective of when we are healthy and are not healthy. So we gain this frame of awareness on when we're fucking off on our phone and when we're dialed in. So it helps show us when we are or not actually engaging or present with something. That's where like no judgment is so beyond important. Or do we become attached to the shit when we're watching Netflix? Or can we acknowledge, okay, that helped me fucking see I'm probably not where I should be, but by being where I should be and am, I have seen that I'm not where I should be. So then we can reroute from there and actually build better behavior. I really do feel like it's all helping guide us into like purpose. Deep perceptional purpose.
What's been your journey lately into that purpose? What have you been finding?
That's a good question. Perhaps deeper alignment with, that's so funny, with purpose itself. Like more purpose with the podcast, more purpose with building an environment, because I've been doing that for so long. Now it seems to be blossoming in a way where it's like, oh shit, this may be way more important than I know. So it's like almost delving deeper into what I've been working on just intuitively. And now it's becoming more conscious, more directional, more intentional. It's like this different depth to the same pattern that comes when we gain experience in something. Anybody with deep, deep, deep experience in anything knows that comprehension comes in waves. And there's deeper comprehension the more we go. Like, I feel like recently I hit a boundary, and now it's like, oh, fuck, bro. There's a whole other layer to this. And that happened with my meditative practice in like the last few months, dude. Something just registered where I hit a depth in meditation that I'm not sure I've ever experienced before. So just this next dimension of whatever that may be. And seeing that the things that we may have been working on or providing or producing may be helping that move forward in a very beautiful way.
Yeah. You know, that's something that you hear about in a lot of people's stories, is a breakthrough in meditation that often leads to the great epiphany or the great learning. Like that was what Buddha happened with the Buddha. Is he basically, there's all these different stories that basically sound a lot like what happened with the Buddha. If you study myth and if you study all these different traditions, the story of the Buddha where he just says basically, fuck it, I'm going to sit next to this tree and I'm going to meditate until I figure it all out. And that's basically what he did. And then he just sat there and meditated in the stories for, I forget how long, but a long fucking time. And then that's when he had his big epiphanies about the nature of suffering and about the nature of attachment. And that became Buddhism. And then, you know, the same happens in a lot of mythological traditions, is there's some character, some mythological figure or deity who has a breakthrough in meditation, basically. But it all stems from someone basically saying, I'm just going to sit here for as long as it takes me to figure this shit out. I mean, that's what happened with Jesus. There's always this story. Jesus went into the desert for 40 days and 40 nights, and he encountered the devil. And I was like, man, it sounds a lot like my last ayahuasca experience. But yeah, 40 days and 40 nights, of course. But you get what I'm saying. Like, there's always these stories of the character having basically saying, I'm going to take as long as it takes me to figure this thing out. And then that's the epiphany. What was it like for you? Was it that sort of a thing where it's like you basically just sat in meditation for an extremely long time until it all kind of made sense? Or has it been more short-termed in a way that doesn't take your whole day, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So both in the way that it's compounded moment after moment after moment after moment. It's like martial arts. You go for an hour here, you go for an hour there, and eventually you gain depth into something. So it's almost as if meditation can help us really integrate, re-register, digest, and repurpose the information that's been learned. It's like, so we're going, like, let's say learning is at this diagonal, and we meditate. It's like, and we go deeper, meditate, go deeper, and we meditate. Like, it's like this dump of like, oh shit. And you have enough of those in different moments under different constructs and with different recognitions that they build something so deep and so monumental that it's undeniable.
Yeah, and then it becomes easier to drop back into that place.
For sure. Floating, anything.
That's so cool, man. I'm really glad that you're having that. Those are so nice.
You're beautiful. Thank you.
Those are really nice. What sort of meditation do you do typically?
I was actually going to ask you my response to this. That's very interesting. So, okay, a lot of my meditations are literally just feeling what's present. Just being deeply mindful of what's happening, whether it's sensation or patterns or whatever, and just trying to hone deeper into the body. So what do you feel like the benefit or the difference in being just deeply aware and then like prayer or projection or intention or affirmations or whatever that may be? Because that's a very different approach to a similar concept.
Yeah, it is, I think. Well, I think that prayer or something of that variety is like an attempt to contact something beyond yourself. I think like an angel or Jesus or Buddha or something like that. You know, you're trying to contact a third party that you feel you need to have a chat with for some reason, either to ask them to do something for you or to thank them for something, or to just talk with them, or maybe contact a dead relative or whatever. Or a dead relative, that's another method. People try to contact the dead, or maybe telepathically. I could try to get in touch with you, like telepathically. Have you ever done that with friends? You try to telepathically communicate with each other? It works. I guarantee you that. But anyway, so I feel like that's all one genre. And then meditation is more like, you're just trying to, you know, almost not think is the goal of meditation, is a lack of thought almost, you know, the less thought, the better perhaps. And then there's breath work, which is more like thoughts are irrelevant, but it's focused on the breath. Mm-hmm. Think about whatever the fuck you want, but the breath is what you're focusing on. And that's like another genre. And then the whole practice of like intention setting or whatever, now we're getting into magic, you know what I mean? And that's a whole different category. Now we're getting into ritual and ceremony, because that's really what intention setting is. Like, even as something as little as writing down your goals for the month on a piece of paper and then burning it in a candle, it's magic. Like, if the Inquisition found you, you would have been tortured. You know what I mean? Like, for real. Like, It's like in this new age, this whole law of attraction thing, this whole idea of affirmations, it all stems from the occult and esoteric traditions that date back to Egypt and Greece of magic and ritual and ceremony, which is totally lost in our modern world, the art of ceremony and stuff like that. But I feel like those are almost like all different things. And then there's just you and how you just are mindful and present in your day-to-day life. And that's like a whole other thing, you know, that the ego, basically dealing with your ego basically is this whole other side of you that comes out, you know, versus when you're in a ceremony of sorts. And ceremony can also obviously involve the plants, but that's a long-winded answer to your question. But I just feel like there's so many different genres of this thing that we call like mindfulness, you know, you know what I mean? 100% They're all totally different.
That's a very important recognition to hold, because it kind of dates back to what you were saying earlier, how if we provide each other with tools, then we can better learn how to coach ourselves or how to really go through our own journey. And it seems to be everything that you just described helps our own day-to-day mindfulness. Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter how or what, everything that you use as an example helps us become more mindful of what's going on.
Right.
So like that's like the middle ground here.
I think that's the important part too, is balance, and what the Egyptians called Ma'at, which they turned into a god. They valued balance so much that they deified it and made it the goddess Ma'at. It's the god of balance, but it's literally the concept of balance made into a god. And then they worship the concept of balance essentially in some of their traditions.
Dang,
it's very interesting to think about it that way. That it's such a treasured thing, and that essentially one of the goals of the Egyptian pharaoh, one of his duties was to uphold balance in the kingdom, to preserve Ma'at. Was one of his charged duties, I believe. Obviously, I'm not an Egyptologist, but this is what I've read. But yeah, man. And the other thing too that I think that we should talk about is just that the concept of mindfulness in general, being in the moment or whatever you want to talk about. Because if you really talk about what it means to actually be in the moment, it doesn't exactly correspond with modern day life. You know what I mean? Because if you and I are really in the moment, we would never pay bills. You know what I mean? Because really in the moment is just this profound understanding that like time doesn't exist, that right now, this time here is all we get. So there's no point in doing anything else. You know what I mean? But if we were really in the moment, like if we just had this profound awakening understanding that like, this is it, you know, time, the past and the future have no, you know, there's nothing there, then, we probably would get fired from our jobs because we would never be on time. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where I think that the secret to happiness really is kind of like learning how to not have to worry about time and just kind of be in that present state. But at the same time, it's almost like 2019 life does not coexist with that. And therein lies the problem for the modern day enthusiast. Therein lies the reason why there's so many books about how to be mindful and stuff like that, because it's hard to be mindful when you got to be at work at 6 a.m. or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like, man, of course you can't be in the present moment. You got to be at work. You know what I mean? It's hard. You cannot lose track of all time. How often do you find yourself in a position where you're like, man, I could just lose track of all time and space right now and it would be fine. Like, even if you go for like a week-long retreat or something, you still got to be back after the week. You know what I mean?
Well,
that's the problem.
That's where meditation and plant medicine journeys really help repurpose how we perceive anything, because a meditative moment can feel like forever. So therefore we actually gain more time within time. Floating's enormous for this. I can be in the pod for cognitively knowing that I'm in there for 60 minutes, but it could feel like 4 hours. How are we actually perceiving the present moment? I did a lot of my speech at the Float conference on this exact topic. What if there was a way for us to actually slow down time? And I believe there may be.
I think so too. Have you studied Zen too much, like Zen meditation or Buddhism?
Yeah, but I'm still open to learning. I mean, how much can we freaking learn? You know?
I don't think either of us are like, oh yeah, I've got Zen figured out.
That's a good point.
Maybe, but then again, I think a lesson of a lot of these things is that the lesson is simple, that it's right in front of your face. But I think Zen is really the profound teaching of what we're talking about here. You know, the art of motorcycle maintenance, or whatever you want to call it, where I've
seen that book.
Yeah, like you just basically, I think what it's basically about is you just craft artistry into every single moment that you have. I think, you know, like even if it's you're working some bullshit job, you can still do it perfectly.
Is that what that book's about?
I don't know. I haven't read it, but I'm saying I think that's what Zen teaching is kind of about, is like learning how to flow with things by just being totally focused on whatever it is you're doing. You know, like even if you have some bullshit job, like a PowerPoint to put together at work or something, you can still get like totally zoned in and zenned out on this PowerPoint, and then you just knock it out real quick, and then you move on to, I don't know, your Zen garden. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, but, that's dope.
I think that's what a Zen garden is supposed to teach you, is how to like make a minute thing a very spiritual practice.
Whoa.
So then that applies to fucking whatever, you know, driving your car, picking your nose, whatever.
Wow, bro.
Zen in the art of picking your nose. But yeah, so I think of that, it kind of is how you be mindful, is you understand that everything is ceremonial or ritualistic in a sense. You know, like imagine that you had like just the understanding, like what if you walked around as if all your life was a ceremony? Like all your life you were in a plant medicine ceremony, and you had this understanding that like whatever I do here in line here at Starbucks echoes out into the universe across all time and space, because I do it ritualistically. And you don't have to be serious about that. You don't have to be like, oh
no, but moving with
namaste
purpose.
Starbucks, I will have a venti cappuccino. Like you don't need to be like all self-righteous. I am in ceremony. You know, like you don't have to like walk around in a monk's robe, but you could just like understand that like this encounter I have here echoes out into all of time, because I be the change you want to see in the world, sort of thing.
Dude, that's incredible.
That's what I think that's what it's all about.
That's what it's all about, bro, is realizing we are all one. We are so bonded and connected. And what we choose to do, how we choose to feel, communicate, the words we express, that influences the rest of potential experience, bro.
Yeah, and here's the thing though, is that like we were talking about before, is is people say this stuff for fucking years and years. People have been saying this kind of stuff, but I think that it's clicking now because we're starting to elevate into this understanding of oneness of what you were talking about. And we're understanding, oh, it's not some hippie woo-woo pie in the sky bullshit. No, we're literally one organism. So what that means is that hypothetically this conversation, if no one heard it, if you look at it, you're like, oh shit, it's not recording or whatever. It doesn't matter because the vibrational pulse of this conversation just got downloaded into Boise, Idaho, like a torrent almost coming from the sky, and it pulsates out across this whole area. And I'm not just saying, oh, me and Zarin are here as Jesus and Buddha having this wonderful, no, like there's probably someone down the street having this similar conversation with their friend over coffee. And they're like, man, I've been reading this crazy ass book by, you know, so-and-so or whatever. And then they start talking about this exact same concept, but they got to it from a different perspective. That's what I'm saying. That's what's happening here. It's not you and me. It's just that there's probably other people in every country, in every world, in every city right now having some version of this conversation.
What if thoughts that flow in are from other people thinking the same thought?
That's what I've realized, man. That's what me and my friends started to realize, because we started to do a whole lot with tarot and angel cards and all this kind of stuff. And I'm still really into that stuff, but it was crazy. Because I started to ask requests of my angel guides or my spirit guides or whoever, like people do, like, man, you know, spirit angel guides or whoever really need help with this, that, the other thing. And then my friend would do whatever it is I was without me asking them. My friend would like hook me up with whatever it is I had asked the angels for or whatever. And then it clicked for me. And I was like, okay, if this whole higher self thing is real or whatever you want to call it, this whole like, if we really do have a soul that extends out into time and space, I probably didn't ask my angels to get me that thing. I probably somehow telepathically just literally got in touch with my friend, and then she hooked me up with the thing I was trying to do. You know what I mean? And it's a literal exchange. Like it's very practical. Me and my friends have started to experiment with it a lot. And it's been a crazy year, man, because yeah, I think that we are telepathically linked a lot more than we think. Because we are all one consciousness. Like a book that really changed my perspective on this is called The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible by Charles Eisenstein. He talks about transitioning from the old story of separation into the new story of what he calls interbeing, which is this oneness that we're talking about. And he says that this is the time where we're kind of making that transition and seeing like what it all looks like. And he talks about how what we're realizing is that we're one organism that looks out at the world from a billion different eyes. But that's literally what's going on, is that you and I are literally the same, but we just look out from different eyes, different views. But it's a literal thing. That's why you and I are here together, why there's a jaguar on my sweatshirt and a jaguar here. And that's just one example that just came to mind. You know, that, like this, there's a million different things. You know what I mean? And it's people who are new to this sort of thing are usually very confused when I start to talk about this stuff, because it sounds a bit crazy, but it's just based off of what I've experienced. So going down that round, so then you're like, okay, so you're doing this mentorship, for instance, with Aubrey Marcus, which is fucking awesome.
Wait, hold up.
Yeah.
So Aubrey's actually shared an experience with the medicine in terms of, I'm not speaking for his experience. This is just how I'm able to reinterpret and share a message. It had something to do with an eagle, and like an eagle that sees all things. And the eagle was trying to present Aubrey with a message of Like Aubrey was asking something like, how do you see so well? How do you see so far? And the ego responded was, because I see through all eyes. And like that's the epitome of compassion. That's the epitome of perceiving so vastly far beyond where you are. Can you perceive through the lenses of more people than just yourself? This brings all back around to perception, obtaining and gaining and broadening perception. And how do we do that? Literally by opening our perceptual awareness from internal to more broadened, but realizing the broadened perspective revolves around the internal. And there's this crazy wave and flow that produces more and more ability. What do we do with that? Do we abuse it? Do we shit on it? Do we apply it for proper intention and purpose and relation and the fucking evolution of consciousness, which is what seems to be the most important thing on planet Earth? And we seem to be doing this in a very collective, wholesome manner with people all around the world, vibing and getting downloads and really coming together for the betterment of others and para el bien de todos, for the good of all.
It's pretty great, isn't it? It's wonderful. And it's the sort of thing where I think that we are experiencing some sort of a end times sort of thing, but in a really good way. And that's what have you read Yuval Noah Harari's books, like Sapiens and Homo Deus and those books? He talks about it in Homo Deus. He says that it's a scary time because it feels like the world is falling apart, but it's not the world that's falling apart. It's civilization that's falling apart. The old ways of doing things are all falling apart. And that is scary, for sure. But it's going to give rise to something better.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk on that shift, whether it's 2012 or just our era, and how there may be a split of consciousness that we may not know happened, but the deeper we go into it, the more we recognize it. Mm-hmm. And you get people, this is without judgment, but for lack of a better example, worshiping things like racism or that concept, right? And you get people that are going the other direction. That's a split in like conscious awareness, bro.
Yep.
And it's so wild.
Yep. It's crazy.
It's happening.
Yeah.
And it's probably always been happening.
Well, there's some people who believe that that's what is always talked about. That's what a lot of these like apocryphal texts are talking about when they say that, you know, there's some who will enter heaven and some who will enter hell. It's not some will burn forever in eternity. It's more like you and I will be walking around in this world, understanding that it's a playground, having the time of our lives, doing creating our realities and doing whatever we please, and understanding that we live in heaven and that's what this has always been, is we live in the Garden of Eden, perhaps we never left. And we just, you know, kind of have re-entered this new awakening, this what the Zohar in the Kabbalah talks about, the tree of life consciousness, that this understanding that, you know, we can learn from joy instead of learning from pain. So that is, you know, that there will be those who choose that path and they will be those who go to heaven, quote unquote heaven, and that the others will go to hell. But it's not that is what a lot of folks that I've been reading about or following, like Terrence McKenna, for instance, this is something that he would talk about, I think, a little bit. But really, Manly Hall is the one who influenced my thinking about this, was that, yeah, maybe that is what's going on. Maybe that is the damnation and hellfire. It's not it's a consciousness thing, but it's voluntary. It's from their own lack of understanding. But it is almost, it's not necessarily fire and brimstone, but it's, you know, bankruptcy and ill health or misery. Not even, maybe plenty of money and wonderful health, but loneliness. Stuff like that. But it's voluntary. It's stuff that people choose to put themselves through. But that is what hell will be, is hell that people will choose and create for themselves. but from a lack of, not even a lack, I don't even know how the best way to put it.
For sure.
And again, I'm not saying like, oh, this is totally what I believe 100%. I'm just saying this is a working theory, you know, a developing understanding of what these ancient texts may have been referring to. For sure.
Bro, thank you.
Thank
so
you, man.
much. I feel like we could talk for a much longer duration of time.
For sure.
But we are unfortunately cutting it close today.
There is that thing that happens in podcasts where you do have to wrap it up.
We do have to wrap it up.
This has been great. We've talked about a million different things. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, bro, that was beautiful. Do you have any remaining words or thoughts?
Really, just to bring it back to a more practical angle, just to close on, I really think that people need community, you know, and that really is what I'm going to be trying to help people out with more with live events. We're going to be launching Phoenix event down in Missouri. We already had our first event, which was a meditation retreat a few months ago, and pretty soon here we're gonna announce winter wellness retreat, which is probably going to be like early December. We're going to come and teach people about how to take care of yourself, mind, body, and spirit during the winter months when it's cold and lonely sometimes.
Cool. Dang,
so
that's a good idea.
We're gonna bring together people and have more of a community-oriented sort of stuff. But I think that that's what people are missing is friendship, real communities that take care of each other, communal living situations like living with multiple people in a house. Again, I don't like any sort of like quid pro quo. I always like to set things up where people are either working and I don't like to do stuff where it's like, oh, you do chores and you get to live here. But if it's something like, oh, you're going to fix the floors in the house and you get to live here. Like that's stuff that I recommend people like try to put together. But that's been really great for us out in the Ozarks is putting together little communal living situations just to help people get out of loneliness and into a real community of sorts. You know, done in a healthy way, especially. I hope that makes sense. But I'd say that, you know, I think that's what our world needs right now. So to people listening, I hope that's what you take away.
You're beautiful.
You are too, man, for sure.
Thank you, bro. Until next time.
For sure, man. 100%.
Peace.
Dude, this was great.